Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I think we've got just about everybody making their way down from the reception. I'm Dr. Patrick Lewis. I'm the president and CEO of the Filson Historical Society. Thank you for joining us for tonight's program. I would like to thank and recognize the University of Louisville's Christina Lee Brown Envirome Institute as the sponsor for our event tonight. Please take that button home with you if you don't have one already. Even if you do, put it on your tote bag, put it on your lapel, give it to somebody. Now I'll turn over the mic to Dr. Ted Smith, representing the Envirome Institute and the University of Louisville.
Well, good evening and welcome to the 7th edition of the Sedgewick Lecture Series. I was reminded that we've now been at this for 2 years as of last week, so it's all downhill from here. I'm very sure of that. We're not quite ready to confirm our next speaker, but we're pretty darn close, so keep an eye on your inbox. But this evening is going to be a real treat. I'm not here to introduce her, of course, I'm here to introduce Todd, but I just want to remind everybody, but this lecture series is a pretty big departure for the Envirome Institute because we spend a lot of time looking at human health and looking at, cardiovascular research, and working with Ambassador Sedgewick, we've had the opportunity to broaden our horizons quite a bit and think about health much more broadly. And so Todd is our inspiration, and so please welcome him to introduce our speaker. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Todd Sedgewick, and I have a problem, and that is the iPhone. No, I have an addiction, and the social media folks, the reason they're so wealthy is they're taking advantage of this addiction that we all have to social media and iPhones. And but this addiction starts in the schools, and the folks who run these social media and iPhone companies are incredibly wealthy because they won't allow their own children to use these devices because they know that they make their kids addicted, so they don't allow their own children to use these devices. So it's an honor really to have Emily Cherkin here to talk to us about what she's doing about it. And she is a recognized consultant in this field of how technology affects behavior and learning. She got interested in the field because she was a middle school teacher, and so she understood firsthand how iPhones and technology affects kids and learning and behavior. So that's how she evolved into becoming a consultant in this area. She's written about this in the New York Times, Washington Post. She's appeared on the CNN Today Show. She's written in the Washington Post, New York Times, Good Morning America, Australia Weekend Today, BBC, NPR. So she's widely respected as an expert in this area. She teaches parenting courses, offers private parent consultations, gives school presentations, as she did actually this morning at Collegiate here in town. And we're delighted to have Rob McCrae, who's the headmaster at Collegiate, here with us tonight. And she's an expert in her own home because she's the parent of a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And she's also a co-founder of a very interesting organization, which I think she will talk about, which is the Student Data Privacy Project, which focuses on how to protect the data of school children, which is a big deal. So please join me in welcoming Emily Cherkin.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me and the lovely introduction. And I'm really honored to be here. And I should preface this by saying I could talk about this for hours, but I won't. So I will try to stay focused on what I have written for you tonight. I'm telling you this actually, I prepared this talk very specially for this specific event. So you're getting the, what do we call that? The debut, the first world premiere of this keynote. So I'm very excited and honored to bring that to you today. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for bringing me here from Seattle, where I live. And tonight I am focusing something a little bit differently than what I did this morning at Collegiate and how I normally do my school presentations. Tonight I want to actually talk about the future of education, because as a former classroom teacher, I have deep respect for the profession and profound concern for what I see as a growing threat to that profession in the form of educational technology or ed tech. So I forgot, I gotta do this. There we go. So about me, my name's Emily Cherkin. Like Todd said, I'm a mother of two, we're now 13 and 17. I wrote a book about parenting in the digital age. I taught middle schoolers for over a decade. I've been speaking on this topic for about 6 years, and I've built my consultancy around helping parents and schools become tech intentional. I also believe in walking my walk, not just talking my talk. In our home, our phones do not sleep in our room at night. I share my phone with my 13-year-old daughter, which is fascinating. And I've opted my child out of the school-issued required computer. I am building a movement around tech intentionality, and I'm hoping tonight that you will join me in that movement. And I want to state up front that I am not anti-tech. I am tech intentional. It's a word I actually coined and trademarked. And to me, tech intentionality is the use of technology that is rooted in a value system that protects and prioritizes what is best for children, families, and schools. The TLDR of that, which is too long, didn't read, is later is better, less is more, relationships and skills before screens. So tonight, I'm going to talk about why the schools of the future are tech intentional. And to do so, I want to start by sharing 4 stories with you about how technology has changed both childhood and education. So when I first became a 7th grade English teacher in 2007, I used to track my students' assignments in a paper grade book. When they wondered about a missing assignment, they would come and talk to me. Around 2010, my school started requesting that teachers use a digital platform to enter in our grades and assignments, where we could upload all of this new information. But immediately, 2 things changed. 1, my students no longer came to speak to me. They instead went to the portal. And number 2, parents who now had access 24/7 to a grading program of their children's grades constantly were hitting refresh and emailing me all the time. As a result, I now spend more time in front of my computer responding to parent emails and less time engaging with my students. After I left the classroom in 2015, I worked at a center for children with ADHD. I was paired with one student whom I will call Carly, who was in the 6th grade. She had no books, no notepads, no pencils, only an iPad on which all of her homework assignments were located. One day, Carly had to complete a science assignment. She toggled between multiple tabs from her digital textbook to her school portal, to her writing app, to a web browser. Navigating a digital textbook was challenging, so she gave up, cut and pasted the question from her homework into a browser, then cut and pasted that answer into her writing app. I said, "Do you know what plagiarism is?" She said, "No, and my teacher doesn't really read it anyway." And I said, "Okay, but how about you retype it in your own words at least?" "I don't know how to type," she said. Let's fast forward a few more years. When I was a child, going to McDonald's with my aunt was a special treat. It was especially fun if they had a ball pit and a slide. In the past few years, McDonald's play spaces have given way to a new play space, the touch screen. No slides, no ball pits. Finally, last fall, my friend sent me this photo. It's a group of kindergarten students on the playground before school, where they're free to play and run around before the bell rings. If it looks to you like the children are all sitting on the concrete huddled around something, you're correct. Those are iPads, given to them by the school district for learning. As a former English teacher, I believe these stories can show, not tell, how things have changed. But don't just take it from me. Over a decade ago, Steve Jobs actually said this. "I used to think technology could help education, but I've had to come to the inevitable conclusion that the problem is not one that technology can solve. What's wrong with education cannot be fixed with technology. No amount of technology will make a dent." So let's start by establishing what is the problem. Tonight, I'm going to focus on 3. Screens are in our home, Screens are in our schools, and computers are now attention machines. Let's start with screens in homes. Tablets, like iPads, are often a child's first introduction to a personal computer. As of this year, Common Sense Media has found that 40% of 2-year-olds have their own personal iPad. By the time they're 8, nearly 7 in 10 children have their own. The question of when should I get my child a smartphone is a common one. Today, 30% of 8-year-olds have their own smartphone, and nearly 3/4 of 12-year-olds, which is roughly 7th grade, the year that I taught. By the time children reach teen years, nearly 95% of them have smartphones. On average, 8 to 18-year-olds are spending 7.5 hours per day on their personal devices. It is very important to point out that this is time spent outside of the school day. And the metric by which technology companies make money is the amount of time that children spend on devices. So we've been hearing a lot about phone-free schools, and efforts are spreading globally to institute phone bans because mounting evidence with support by experts like Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, increasingly is showing the problems with student devices in schools. They present harmful impacts on learning and focus, myriad negative effects on social and mental health, and place an unfair burden on teachers to police and enforce their use. I wholeheartedly support these efforts. They are sorely needed yesterday, but a phone ban is just part one. In this category, screen use for school, which is provided by or required by the school, this category has gotten less attention, but it is no less worrisome. Schools can ban student devices from first to last bell, but if a school is also providing ed tech in the form of one-to-one laptops or digital learning management systems for student use, children are still faced with the same harms as are presented by the personal devices. Ed tech can include things like the devices themselves, which are Chromebooks or iPads, learning management systems, which are things like Schoology or Canva, digital curriculum like iExcel or Amplify, and grading and assessment tools like iReady or Google Classroom. And there are hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of platforms like this. And many, many more, like tools for registration and transportation and attendance and so on. Underlying all these tools are unified data platforms, the most popular of which is called PowerSchool, an ed tech company purchased last year by Bain Capital for $5.6 billion. PowerSchool proudly, in their own marketing materials, refers to their products as, quote, cradle to career data systems. I'd like to talk for a minute about computers themselves to challenge our understanding of what computers are in today, 2025. Because today, computers are attention machines. When we were growing up, 50, 20, or even 10 years ago, our use of computers in school was very different from what is happening today. In our childhood, or in my childhood, we had computer labs with hardwired machines. We learned typing on non-internet connected computers. We wrote our rough drafts by hand and typed our final drafts in a word processor. Many of us still think of computers like this, as a tool, a machine we use to accomplish tasks and create things. This is why it can be so hard to understand what the problem is with educational technology today, because computers are not tools in the same way today. Today, they are designed to capture our attention and reward us, just like slot machines in a casino. They are filled with access to applications like YouTube and Pinterest, internet games, gamified curricula like Prodigy Math. And these applications use notifications, points, rewards to increase time on device, exactly like social media platforms do. Today, schools no longer have computer labs, they have one-to-ones, which is one device per child. Children are not taught typing skills by a teacher, they learn it on an app. And yes, they might still type their final drafts in a word processing program, but it's internet connected, and they have to worry about other distractions and things like AI prompts. We have filled our classrooms with slot machines. So let's talk about slot machines for a minute. Because what makes them so compelling is something called persuasive design. And the reason humans become so addicted to things like slot machines is because of something called intermittent variable rewards, which is simply put, the unpredictable nature of our devices. So we might win, but we might not always win. So if you've ever had that feeling where you open up an app and then you close it immediately and open it again because you might have a new email or you might have a new like, you are being subjected to this form of persuasive design. And we can see the same thing happening with things like watching television shows, which isn't television anymore. It's all streaming. You don't click play next episode, you wait and it auto plays the next one for you. All of these are very intentional design features, again, with keeping in mind, trying to keep us on that device for longer. So I define, and this is a simplified definition of persuasive design, is the use of psychology plus technology to change our behavior. So again, to keep us refreshing the inboxes even when we don't have new emails, to keep us binge watching on Netflix even when we don't want to watch another episode, and of course to keep us scrolling through those social media feeds because there's no bottom. These features cleverly tap into our neural pathways, flooding our brains with dopamine, which feels really good. But in order to maintain that same good feeling and to keep it going, we actually have to engage more with the product. And so our brains adapt. We can look around at the adult world and see how much of a problematic hold these types of features and devices have on us with our adult brains. But when it comes to children whose brains are still developing, it is far more impactful and not in a good way. As I often tell parents, you're not fighting with your child to get off your screen. It's not you versus your child. You are fighting a hijacked neural pathway, and it's not a fair fight. Here's what one tech insider has said. Your kid is not weak-willed because she can't get off her phone. Your kid's brain is being engineered to get her to stay on her phone. The technology industry makes no secret of the fact that they hire developmental psychologists to make their products as compelling as possible. This is a problem for adults. It is a crisis for children. Why are we putting persuasively designed slot machines not only in our kids' pockets, but in the backpacks in the form of a school-issued device? I want to talk briefly about brain development, particularly the prefrontal cortex, because that is the latter part of our brain to fully develop, and it's often not fully developed until we're well into our 20s or even 30s. In our prefrontal cortex, we have these skills called executive function. Those are things like organization, planning, prioritization, emotion regulation, time management, cognitive flexibility, the stuff that makes us functional adults and humans in the real world. And they are vital to a healthy adulthood. But they're built in childhood throughout real-world experiences like play and writing and planning assignments on paper and talking to your teachers about homework and solving social conflicts with your friends and tactile and sensory activities, all in the context of caring relationships. The use of screens in and for schools is a crisis for child development because it interferes with this development of executive function. We cannot expect children to grow into balanced, self-regulating adults if we've robbed them of the experiences necessary to build executive function skills in childhood. And I will give you an example that I didn't even write down because it happened on my flight here on the way to Cincinnati, where I flew in. I was sitting next to a college-age student who had her computer open and she was doing homework. I could see the class, I could see the university name, and I could see all of the quiz questions she was working on. And in her hand, she held her phone, and ChatGPT was open. And for every question on her quiz, she typed it into the ChatGPT and then translated it, typed it back into the prompt on her computer. And I wish I could tell you this is the only time I've seen this happening. It is the second flight I have been on in 1 month where a college student was doing the exact same thing. Big tech companies like Meta and TikTok use persuasive design to grab and hold our children's attention, hijacking their neural pathways to capture user data and sell ads. Ed tech is doing the exact same thing, but in the name of education. Ed tech companies make money the exact same way big tech companies do, through time on device. The ed tech industry's claims of 21st century skills mask a profit-driven and harmful business model that puts profits before people. And I have serious concerns about this. As one example, Internet Safety Labs, an independent organization, found that 96% of EdTech apps sell children's data to third parties. Children's data is also extremely valuable. The US Department of Education warns that on the black market, a child's educational record is worth between $250 and $350 per student. There are nearly 50 million school-age children in the United States. This is why there is a giant market for EdTech products. In fact, the EdTech industry is projected to be worth over $800 billion in less than 10 years. EdTech's business model, just like big tech's, is fueled by attention. More specifically, our children's attention. These companies only make money by engaging users for as long as possible so they can collect more data, which they can sell to third parties. It is fundamentally different from our own childhood experiences, even those just 10 years ago, and it is hurting children. At the end of the day, the EdTech business model is extractive, manipulative, and completely out of alignment with child development. Period. There are many ways that EdTech harms children. I'm going to focus on 4 today: privacy, the displacement of other skills, learning, and teaching. If a company collects data, they are vulnerable to cyber attacks. We only have to look back to January of this year to see a clear example. 62 million student records going back over 40 years, plus another 10 million teacher records, were stolen in a breach of PowerSchool's unified data system. It is currently one of the largest data breaches of children's information in US history, and it will not be the last. Secondly, screens are displacing other critical skills. This is a research by Dr. Doug Gentile at Iowa State Media Research Lab that shows how the advent of technology has changed childhood through what he calls displacement. It's essentially that time we spend on screens is time we're not spending doing something else. You can see from this chart that in the 1950s, children had over 68 hours a week available to them to engage in play, reading, sports, family time, chores, homework, or about 9 hours a day on average. Today, that number has shrunk far below 14 hours a week, which was as of 2010, or 2 hours a day, including weekends. We don't have to look hard to see what has changed. The introduction of television, then computers, video games, smartphones, social media, leading to the statistic I shared a minute ago that kids 8 to 18 years old are spending 7.5 hours a day on screen outside of school hours. This is a monumental shift. I would go one step further than Dr. Gentile's research here. Today in school, children's time is also now being displaced by screens. It doesn't matter where screen time occurs. Time spent on screens is time not spent doing other things. We have decades of research about what children need to thrive and develop, and none of it requires a screen. Finally, third, we know that EdTech harms learning. Science Direct found that when students use a laptop in class, 38 of every 60 minutes are spent off task. Is this actually even surprising? We as adults know the pull of 24/7 clickbait news, text notifications, social media feeds when we're trying to write an email on our laptops. And we have fully formed prefrontal cortexes. Expecting children to stay on task when provided with internet-connected devices that have access to YouTube, for example, is absurd from a developmental standpoint. As my colleagues and high school teachers, Matt Miles and Joe Clement, have said, asking kids not to get distracted on school-issued devices is akin to holding an AA meeting in a bar. There's also little robust evidence on digital technology's added value in education, and the evidence that does exist comes from those who are trying to sell it. EdTech products are not actually improving our kids' education, and they are also harming teachers and learning. Here's just one example. My daughter's 7th grade English class has 36 students in it, 35 of whom have a district-issued laptop with access to ChatGPT and YouTube. Her teacher has struggled to get her students to stay on task and focus, and I am not in the least bit surprised. But rather than address the large class size or provide this teacher with additional human support, the district instead invested in a product called GoGuardian, which is a software that is installed on all the student devices. GoGuardian is a surveillance tool, which is a cousin to EdTech that enables teachers to view what each student is doing on their individual laptop, which means that the teacher now sits at the front of the class on at her desk, and on her own computer can monitor 35 screens of the students simultaneously to see if they are on task, as opposed to actually teaching. I highly doubt this is what she thought her teaching career would look like. GoGuardian and other EdTech surveillance technologies prey on teacher stress, administrator fears, and parental concerns in the name of safety and supporting students and teachers. This is like taking medicine to treat the side effects of drinking arsenic-laced water. To paraphrase educational psychologist Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath, who has said, we should be asking why we are drinking arsenic in the first place. Instead of reducing class sizes and actually supporting teachers, districts are too often turning to EdTech as a panacea. EdTech companies convince districts to justify purchasing more tech to assist teachers in, quote, differentiating learning rather than hiring more teachers. As a result, we are fundamentally changing the nature of student-teacher relationships. Forcing teachers to spend time on their computers inputting data into PowerSchool and monitoring student devices turns them into enforcers, not educators. In fact, just last week, I spoke to a teacher who told me he no longer has time to simply teach his students because he has to spend so many hours plugging information into digital platforms. As Dr. Richard Fried says, educators are a key element of school connectedness. Any attempt to replace educators with machines not only risks children's emotional or educational success, but jeopardizes their emotional well-being and safety. EdTech companies for years have made it known that they view the role of teacher as shifting from sage on the stage to guide on the side. Yet this is in direct opposition to what children need. We are fooling ourselves if we think this isn't already happening. AI tutors and chatbots are being deployed in classrooms as we speak to support, quote, overworked teachers and to help them, quote, differentiate instruction. Don't invest in more tech, invest in more teachers. We cannot let this continue. So we need a new vision for education. And I say new in quotes because in reality, what is really needed isn't really new. It's a return to what we know works. I am proposing a new model for education called the Tech Intentional School. And a tech intentional school is a school that makes conscious choices to use technology only when that technology is uniquely necessary, educationally sound, and private by default. Uniquely necessary means that the technology being used is deployed only because no analog alternative is available or superior. It is technology that does something we cannot accomplish solely with a pencil, a paper, or a teacher, such as learning to write code. Technology that is educationally sound means schools use independently funded research, not industry-funded research, to evaluate and assess each digital tool. That technology is pedagogically sound, safe for children, and it works better than any alternative. Finally, private by default means that schools know if a platform collects data, where that data is stored, what the platform does with that data, and what the platform does with that data. Schools and parents have a clear understanding of what they are consenting to when contracting with such companies. It is extremely important to reiterate here that a tech intentional school doesn't have no tech. Tech intentional schools have technology. They just make very conscious choices about what, when, and how that technology is used. So we will know we are in a tech intentional school because the following will be true. The school's default mode is analog over digital. Paper and pencil are the most valued technologies in the classroom. Oops, there we go. Teachers are prioritized over tech. Schools reduce class sizes before they invest in more tech-based Band-Aids. Skills are always prioritized over screens. These schools invest heavily in building and supporting critical and important executive function and social skill development through human interaction. Tech intentional schools invest in tech ed before ed tech. How does a computer work? How do we discern fact from fiction? How do I know what a valid source is? How do I type? All of these skills are skills that children need to build in the digital age, and none of them need to be taught on a one-to-one internet-connected device. And in a tech-intentional school, when it comes to privacy, parents are given clear information about how their child's data will be used for any ed tech platform used by the school. The school is confident that students' data is not being sold. At a tech-intentional school, children's data is less likely to be exposed in a massive data breach than students who attend a non-tech intentional school. So what should we do now? First, if you are the leader of a school, here are 4 things you can do now. Number 1, do a complete audit of your existing EdTech contract services, tools, and products, paid or free, and ask the following questions. Is it uniquely necessary? Is it educationally sound? And is it private by default? I'm not even suggesting canceling contracts right away. I'm start by inviting you to know what you have and what you've agreed to. Number 2, get your decision makers on the same page. IT departments, curriculum specialists, teachers, superintendents, school board, directors, legal. Hold community meetings to understand the problem. Create task forces to analyze and propose solutions. Then follow through on a plan that best fits the model for tech intentionality and puts children and people before profits. Number 3, start investing in technology education, which is distinctly different from ed tech. This could include rebuilding computer labs with hardwired computers, adding typing or other computer literacy skills, and a human technology teacher to the curriculum. Educating staff and students about the history of computer technology and how it's changed so dramatically in 25 years. The business model of technology, including ed tech, how to research and understand mis and disinformation. None of this requires that a child have a one-to-one personal internet-connected device. Finally, and schools can begin this immediately, until you have a handle on steps 1 through 3, provide parents with an opt-out pathway. This can mean opting out of one-to-one devices, the digital curricula, the learning management systems. Yep, this will disproportionately impact teachers, so school leaders will need support to support their staff. Parents and even many teachers are eager for a middle ground option, but none currently exists in schools. Support parents in this while you work on their audit and restructuring. School leaders, I'm going to speak to you for a moment. You will have to make some difficult and unpopular decisions to make meaningful change. But schools who choose to do this have an opportunity to return to what we know works. Stop contracting with companies whose business models seek to extract and manipulate, and step into what schools of the future will be, tech intentional. I've had the opportunity in the past 2 days to speak with several different groups of teachers during my time here in Louisville. More than once, I have asked them, what would happen if overnight the one-to-one technology platforms evaporated? And do you know what answer I have heard more than once? We'd be more than fine. Here's the good news. Becoming tech intentional can actually also help a school stand out and attract students. I know there are a lot of complex issues with education and the whole system. But if parent demand for my services and opt-out pathways is any indication, there is a clear market demand for schools that are freed from ed tech. Parents are looking for an alternative, and you can be one of the first schools to offer it. Okay, parents, our turn. Many of my talks are parent-focused, and I do spend a lot of time helping parents think and rethink about their children's use of and access to digital technology, and that will and does need to continue. But when it comes to ed tech, here are 4 action steps I would like parents to take. Number 1, know what is in your child's backpack. So many parents will say, well, I know my kid has a Chromebook or an iPad for school, but I don't really know what platforms they're using. It's time to find out. Make a list, write them down on a piece of paper. Number 2, approach your school leaders with curiosity. Teachers are often between a rock and a hard place on this, so go to the adult with whom you have the best relationship at the school. Teacher, administrator, counselor. Ask them to help you understand this list. How did they make the decision to come to these particular tools? Express the concerns you have, be curious and respectful. If you are able as a parent, and if you are willing, opt out. Opt out of the standardized testing. Opt out of the online mental health assessments, the digital curricula, the learning management systems, the grading portals, and the one-to-one devices, all of which are owned by companies who seek to profit off of the data they collect. Offer to support your school in transitioning to a tech-intentional framework. Remember, you're fighting for the same thing. Finally, as we work to reduce the presence of devices in our school, we also need to model a healthy way to interact with them at home. This is my favorite piece of advice to give to parents, and this can apply to all adults. We do this by living our life out loud. We narrate everything we do as we do it anytime it comes to using our devices. I'm reaching for my phone. I'm going to text your dad, see what time he's home from work. I'm looking at the map to see what the traffic is. Now I'm opening my email. Think of it like a play-by-play. I always joke that you know it's working when your children roll their eyes at you. Our children seeing us make conscious and intentional choices about how we use technology is a powerful and effective way to model how technology can be used and not how it uses us. This will also help our children understand the importance of also setting limits on the attention machines in their pockets and their backpacks. So, maybe you've noticed fish on my slides. In this polarized day and age, I take great comfort in the fact that concerns about children and technology are wide-ranging and cross political lines. In order for our efforts to be beneficial to children, we will have to work together. This is not a fight between parents and schools. This is a fight for children, and we are on the same team. So when a school of fish is swimming in the ocean, and yes, they're called a school of fish, how do they know when to switch direction? It turns out that it requires one fish to pull away from the group to seek a new path. But that's not enough. It actually requires, in order to make a shift of that school, for a second and a third fish to follow. This is collective action. We are not alone, but someone needs to be that first fish. Yes, it is scary. Yes, it is a big change. And yes, it will require uncomfortable conversations and choices. Yes, it may mean being that parent or that school. But once you start, others will follow. Courage is in short supply, but it is an infinitely renewable resource. Courage is also contagious. I invite you tonight to be a first fish, or a second fish, or a third fish, and find your other fish. Who is ready to join us? Thank you.
We're very fortunate to have some time for Q&A so that folks can hear. I'll pass the mic around if you want to raise your hand if you've got questions. I'll bring it to you.
Did I stun you into silence? I would actually love to hear what stood out too. Like what was something surprising, if that helps, but please go ahead.
So you have a generation or two perhaps that are being raised without fully developed prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
Does anyone have a projection of what the implications of that are for society?
It's a great question. And one of the things that scares me the most about this is the threat it poses to democratic institutions. I really see this as a threat to democracy. And I don't say that lightly, but even that student I sat next to on the airplane who had ChatGPT doing her homework, she was maybe 20, but 10 years ago, this is not what was happening. So she had a relatively screen light childhood. She had no tech in her K-8 experience, or very little. And even today at Collegiate, I got to speak to a bunch of 10th graders, 15-year-olds who were like, we feel so lucky. to have been children 10 years ago. Because we look at the 5-year-olds now and they're all on TikTok, they're making videos, they're addicted to their games. And I keep thinking it can't get more sort of take your breath away. But one of the students we saw today said she works with elementary school age children in a drama program. And she will say to the kids, let's pretend we're flying. And the children say, how? So if you can't imagine how to fly when you're 5, how are you going to solve world problems? You know, I see a through line to that, and it concerns me greatly. And I'm an optimist. I get out of bed in the morning and I do these talks and I work with parents in schools because I believe we have the power to change. And it starts by understanding the problem and knowing how to advocate for change. So that's a great question.
You go. First, thank you very much. Second, I can't speak for children anymore. I can only speak for grandchildren, which is really scary. My question is, it seems like the most quantitative way to understand what's going on would be an audit. So could you explain a little bit more about that process?
For the school technology, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so one data point that I didn't put in, Internet Safety Labs is an excellent resource. They're independently funded. They do reports on all kinds of ed tech platforms. They've found that on average, schools have about 150 unique platforms per school. So that to me is one of the biggest problems. You can't possibly know what all of these companies are saying in their privacy policies. And if 96% of them are selling data, we know that that's probably not good. So the invitation might be a conversation first with staff to find out which of these are used regularly, which of these feel like if you didn't have it, it would really thwart your ability, to teach or something. And I also want to acknowledge that there's state requirements, right? That the state sets standards about what teachers have to teach, and that has to be changed at multiple levels. I'm speaking sort of more to the leadership of schools, but I recognize this is not going to be an easy or, well, I think it can be easy, but it might be painful, right? I think I would like to see broadly some refusal, and I think schools refusing to participate and to say, wait a minute, we read these terms and conditions. I didn't realize this is what was happening. What about this data breach that just happened, right? And I think that is the conversation that has to happen. And I really do believe that schools are victims of this as much as children are victims. So I didn't have it in the slide, but because you mentioned it, one of my advocacy efforts has been around student data privacy. And so we co-founded the Student Data Privacy Project in 2019. It was pre-COVID, to test the efficacy of FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which is technically the law that protects children's data in schools. But do you know when it was last meaningfully updated? Before I was born in 1974. Things have changed a little bit since then in terms of student data. So this is one of the things that the law needs to change. But at the same time, we've got children who can't imagine how to fly. So how do we change things more immediately in the school setting so that we can also work on the legislative and political side as well? It's not easy. And, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of money in big tech and a lot of funding behind delaying or stopping bill passage of things like the Kids Online Safety Act, for example, which is unrelated to ed tech, but is another attempt to try to protect children. So I see this problem very much like what the big tobacco issues were of a generation ago. So I hope the tide is changing, and I have a lot of colleagues and allies in this work fighting to change it. And I hope you'll all join me to do that as well. Yeah.
I have found artificial intelligence has been very helpful to me in my continuing education. What is the place for artificial intelligence in education for our high school and college students in 2025?
I thank you for asking this. My opinion is that AI has no business in K-12 education right now, none. Because it's nascent, because it's untested, because it's unreliable, and because it profits one group of people and one group of people only. And I am deeply concerned. I think I was speaking to some of you before. I heard my 7th grade daughter talking to friends on FaceTime before a couple weeks ago, and she was saying, please don't use ChatGPT to write your history paper, guys. And I said, wait a minute, ChatGPT is on your school computers, which I refused hers anyway, but her friends were using it and contacted the district, and the district said, children need access to this transformative technology. And I said, if by transformative you mean a homework machine, then it's working. They're not doing homework. So, you know, again, for adults, I think we have, in theory, some ability to manage our own use and regulate our own use, but look at all of us. I mean, not you literally, but look at adults in general. We struggle to manage our own devices. So that doesn't mean we can't teach children about AI. It's in the conversation, but we don't need to give them AI to learn about it. And until they have the critical thinking skills and the ability to make decisions about whether it's safe or good or bad, they shouldn't be using it. It's dangerous, is what I would argue. And, you know, to go back to Power School, they are deploying something called Power Buddy, which is an AI chatbot, and it's being marketed to schools and teachers as a way of helping overworked teachers with big class sizes reach their students. I think parents should be outraged by that. Yeah. And schools. Yeah.
Would you mind sharing some of the challenges and the benefits that your daughter has had from opting out amongst the
Yes.
class with people who are still using it?
Yes. So I will say what makes my job much easier is that I have an incredibly supportive principal who is completely on board with it and would love to make that a school-wide policy. Let's just say my district doesn't like me very much. So I've tried, and now I'm working more directly with the school. So what I will tell you anecdotally about my daughter's experience, she used it last year in 6th grade and every day came home from school and said her head hurt. So, you know, we tried Advil, we took her to the doctor, we took her to the eye doctor, had her eyes checked, got her glasses. And then over the summer, I was like, why do we have this? You barely use it for homework. She can access the portals on our computers. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. So I'm just not going to have you use the computer this year. Guess what? No headaches. Now, this is one kid, so I can't say that that would be true for all of it, but her, you know, there was just a paper last week about increased rates of myopia, which is permanent nearsightedness. We're all sitting here doing these things right in front of our face. So the other advantage, and I think on my website, I actually created a free Unplug EdTech toolkit, which was a toolkit for parents who want to explore the opt-out process. And it's very teacher friendly because I want people to know that the burden does fall on teachers unfairly. And so I will tell you, I've had that up less than 6 months and I have 600 downloads. And I don't really market it. People are finding it, people are asking. So I am trying to help people walk through that process. I think a really important part of opting out is making sure you have a team approach, that it isn't to do it in an adversarial way, and to get your children to understand why. Because I think there is some social stigma that can come from it, especially for middle schoolers, right? And so how to have that conversation. I think if your children are K-5, to me, that's a no-brainer. Unless there is a documented developmental need, like a learning disability, you know, somebody's nonverbal, it might be a tool, there isn't a benefit. And I'm not just saying that, that's what the research is saying. So for K-5 especially, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Emily, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the data privacy lawsuit that you're.
Yes, I can. So I am currently the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit against Power School. And it is an ongoing litigation, so I can't speak too much about it. But I will say that it is Googleable. So you can read the complaint in its detail, but we filed on behalf of my child on her school computer about data privacy harms. So the fact that the tools that she was using in school, and in this case, it was Power School, is collecting data and selling it to third parties, allegedly. And as a result, that's harming children, my child, but all children. So that the goal of the class action was to say, this isn't just me. I'm not doing this for myself. This is because it's harming all children. So just today got a text that the judge decided not to throw out the case, which is a huge win for us. So actually, literally a few hours ago, I got a text from my lawyers. So if you're interested in learning more about kind of the legal ramifications, there is actually now a law firm called the EdTech Law Center, and they are edtech.law, and they are representing me. They've been my activist allies for about 6 years. So they're friends of mine, a husband-wife team, and they're incredible. They will talk to anyone, no charge, because they're a consumer protection law firm, I think is the way you say it. They don't get paid unless they go and earn a settlement. And their goal is to help as many parents as possible and schools. So I will say they're very interested in talking to school districts who have potentially been harmed by ed tech companies as well. And I think that's a little bit more of a precarious situation, but that is something they're very, very open to talking about. So thank you for asking about that. Yeah, there was just an article, I think in, is it the markup or the 74 million? There's some recent news about it. I highly recommend checking that out because I have to be careful about what I say publicly. Yes. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Did you mention the legislative reform might be a potential? It seems like the last couple of months, that is a challenge.
Yes, legislative reform. So always the power of the ballot and democracy in action. Those are all really great things. My husband, I will be full disclosure, my husband works in the tech industry. So I usually open with that, but then I didn't want to be like starting with that and then landing with this heavy point. But he ran for school board, which is, public school in our city. And, Seattle's got some of its own challenges, but we have a lot of big tech in Seattle, right? So it's a very weird dynamic between their parents who are very pro tech and parents who are very no tech. So yes, I do highly recommend, whether it's testifying at school board meetings or speaking to your local representatives. I mean, at whatever level you feel comfortable. I think, again, the activism piece has to come from a place where you feel comfortable and not too comfortable, because I am pushing people a little here. I want you to get a little uncomfortable because that's where we start to see change. But, if you have a relationship with someone, my adage is to always start by replacing judgment with curiosity. And that's how I start all of my parent talks, because I think one of the things about today's political climate is everybody's on edge, defensive, feels attacked. And so if we can disarm that and start by just asking questions, I'm curious, I wonder, how could we do this differently? We have the same concern, even if we have different ideas about how to get there. That gives me hope. They say politics makes strange bedfellows, right? Like there are people that I may not agree with on a lot of things who are very much in agreement about this. I will say, especially data privacy issues tend to be very nonpartisan in a very fascinating way. And in this world, that's really unusual to find something that isn't partisan. So that's a great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I have two things. The first, just to speak to his point of when is it appropriate to use AI. Our son is a PhD geographer at Georgia State University. The love of teaching has been sucked out of his life dealing with students who are masters and PhD, working on those degrees using AI and plagiarizing and just absolutely not doing the work at all. I mean, he is ready to leave the profession because of it. And the other thing I want to say, just speaking to Jefferson County, and we have 4 grandchildren in JCPS schools. My husband's a retired teacher. We're big advocates for public education, but I'm appalled at what is going on. And we have one grandchild with ADHD, and our daughter has fought and fought against the fact that he is on a Chromebook all day. It is absolutely the worst thing in the world for him.
Yeah.
And she's gotten nowhere.
Oh,
And there are even things written into his 504 plan,
yeah.
but it doesn't help. And I don't know where we really, I want to be part of making a change.
Yeah. Yeah.
because I can see how detrimental it is,
Mhm.
but I don't know how we go about doing this in a system as large as the one we have here. in
Yes,
Jefferson County.
I've learned it's very large. And here's one of the things that really concerns me is I don't want to see school districts facing lawsuits. Unfortunately, I think if things don't change, that will happen. And so it's a little bit like turning the Titanic, I imagine, at this point. I know that I am a lone voice in a, not a lone voice, you are here with me, right? We're a few voices in a loud crowd, but I do think, again, if we look at, I don't know how to imagine how to fly, and we look at a college student, I was thinking, what if she's pre-med? She might be my doctor someday. And she's using ChatGPT to do her science test. Like, what's the point? And I think there is a huge marketing budget behind technology platforms to convince us that if we don't do this or use this or have this now, we miss out. FOMO, right? They prey on our fear of missing out, or that we'll somehow be behind. And I hear this from parents about the opting out, the refusing to do it. Ideally working with the school and the district to say I'm refusing the computer. Sounds like that's been attempted and isn't going well. And the next is to just say, I'm not using the computer. And my child has a right to education in this country. And that is at the point where I would probably send you to my friends, Julie and Andy, to talk about next steps. But it is really, really devastating. And the love of teaching, I don't know if I could stay in the classroom today under the current circumstances. I think I might have been fired is probably what would happen. But just because the love of teaching is also gone. I have so many teachers who have left the profession because they don't feel, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but there's a teacher shortage. And, so if you can't hire good people, then why are you investing in more tech? That's the other thing, is just to ask about the costs. One of the activism suits I dealt with in Seattle was about a science curriculum, one science curriculum that was a 9-year contract for $9 million. $9 million. Like, how many teachers could you have hired? How many school counselors could you have put in place? That's a lot of money. And I know there's the budgets, and I don't understand all of that, like different budgets and different pools of money, but I feel like there's a way we could figure that out. So yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
I have a question, excuse me. I'm an aunt, so I'm just outside looking in somewhat, but 2 teenagers, both horribly addicted, just to
Yeah.
continue the analogy. And it's also used as a reward and punishment. And so how to use your AA in the bar, how do you detox?
It's
Particularly teenagers, they're well along the way.
Yeah, teenagers is always a really tough one. And I say to parents all the time, like, if I could tell you what the parents of teenagers tell me, like to the parents of younger kids, none of them say, I wish I had given them a phone sooner, right? But how do you extricate once it's been given? So I talked a little bit about this morning in my parent presentation, but a lot of times parents will ask 2 questions all the time. How much screen time is too much, and what parental controls do you recommend? And the problem is that parental controls tend to be our hope for a silver lining solution. But if it's the most asked question I get, it doesn't work, right? There's a lot of problems with it. So the questions I want parents to ask instead are, do you know what your child's doing online, and do you have a strong relationship with them? And to me, the relationship strength is as much of the antidote as you're going to get. But that's so hard because technology is also the #1 stressor in so many families, that it's a constant fight. It's a constant carrot and stick because it works, because of the dopamine, because of the, it feels good when they get it and it feels so bad when they don't, that's all the leverage parents feel like they have. So a lot of the work I do with parents is actually starting by looking at parent use of screens in a non-judgmental way, but I invite you to get curious about, does your phone live in your room at night? Because you can't tell your teenager his phone can't go in their room at night if your phone's in your room at night, right? Like, it's that modeling piece. So it is more challenging with teenagers, but I also don't believe it's ever something to walk away from. It's always worth the fight. It is always worth focusing on, not the fight with your kid, the fight for your kid, right? To, working with them and acknowledging that it's hard, that look at us. I do think teenagers want limits. They will never ask you for them. And if I may use a rude gesture, but not directed at you, I feel like this is what parenting teenagers is like. So, it's this very much leave me alone and I need you. And they're not going to say this part out loud. So we have to ignore this part and we have to pay attention to this part. And this part might be, I need you to set a clear boundary. Because parents have a lot of work to do. We are not off the hook in this. It's not our fault, but it's our responsibility. So.
That's a really important point to leave it on. Another round of applause, please.
Thank you so much.